Before we get started, drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. And if stories like this one hit different for you, go ahead and hit subscribe. We post new stories every week, and you do not want to miss what's coming next. Now, let's talk about what happened to a man named Nathaniel Corwin the day he walked into a hospital waiting room and came face to face with a set of twin girls he had never met, who had his mother's nose, his grandfather's stubborn jaw, and the last name of a woman he had spent 4 years trying to forget. He didn't move for a long time. People walked around him. A nurse asked if he needed help. He didn't answer. He just stood there, briefcase still in his hand, coat still buttoned to the throat, staring at two small faces that were staring right back at him with absolutely no idea what they had just broken open. Nathaniel Corwin was 41 years old, the kind of successful that people describe in terms of square footage and zip codes. He ran a mid-sized architecture firm in Chicago that had grown, under his direction, from 8 employees to 73. He drove a sensible car, kept a clean apartment in Lincoln Park, and had not, in 4 years, gone on a single second date with anyone. That last part was not by accident. He had been married once, to a woman named Petra Solis. They met in their early 30s at a conference in Denver. Neither of them had wanted to attend. She was a structural engineer with a dry sense of humor and an opinion about every building they walked past. He loved her immediately and completely, in the way that you love something you didn't know you were missing until it was standing right in front of you with a coffee cup in one hand and a blueprint critique in the other. They were married 14 months after they met, in a small ceremony in Evanston. No elaborate venue, no slideshow. Just 30 people, good food, and a string quartet that played a little too quietly for the size of the room. His mother, Dorothea Corwin, did not opinions the way other people have furniture, everywhere, load-bearing, and very difficult to move. She had raised Nathaniel alone after his father left when Nathaniel was 9, and she had built, around that wound, a particular kind of pride that calcified, over the decades, into something harder. She wanted Nathaniel to marry someone from a certain kind of family, with a certain kind of background, and Petra, who had grown up in Tucson with a mechanic father and a mother who taught kindergarten, did not fit the blueprint. Dorothea was never outright cruel to Petra. She was something more difficult than that. She was consistently, quietly, precisely discouraging. A comment here, a raised eyebrow there. The kind of undermining that doesn't leave marks but leaves damage. Petra tried. Nathaniel watched her try, and he loved her for it. And he also told himself, for a long time, that his mother would come around, that it was just adjustment, that it would get better. It didn't get better. 3 years into the marriage, Nathaniel was working 60-hour weeks. The firm was growing fast, and he was not yet good at delegating. And he would admit this later, too late, to an empty apartment at midnight. Not yet good at being present either. He would come home to a dinner that had gone cold and not think to apologize. He would cancel plans and expect understanding. He would look at Petra across the kitchen table and feel the distance between them and tell himself it was temporary. Dorothea had dinner with Nathaniel every Sunday. She always had something to say about Petra, that Petra seemed withdrawn, that Petra had been short with her on the phone, that she'd heard from a friend. Dorothea always had a friend, that Petra had been seen having lunch with a colleague, a male colleague. Twice. Nathaniel told his mother she was being ridiculous, but the thing about a slow drip is that you don't notice the water level rising until your feet are wet. He started to pull back, not dramatically, not consciously, just slightly, a little cooler, a little more guarded. Petra noticed. She said so. He told her she was imagining it. He was not good then at being wrong. The night it ended wasn't the night of the big argument. That argument had happened 2 weeks earlier and resolved nothing. The night it ended was a quiet Tuesday in February. Petra came home with 2 bags already packed. She set them down by the door. She didn't cry. She looked at him with the particular expression of a person who has finished grieving something while the other person wasn't paying attention. She said, "I've been trying to reach you for a year. I need you to know that before I go." He said something inadequate. He didn't remember exactly what. Something about timing, about the firm, about giving it more time. She said, I can't keep asking you to show up for something you've already left. And she left. He did not fight it. He told himself that was because he respected her decision. Later, he understood that it was because some part of him had believed his mother's version of things for longer than he'd realized, and that realization would take years to fully surface. And when it did, it would be in a hospital waiting room in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon, with a briefcase in his hand, and two small girls staring at him from across the room. 4 years pass the way years pass, when you fill them deliberately. Work, travel, the occasional dinner with colleagues, a standing Saturday, call with his college roommate who lived in Portland and always said, "You should really try therapy," in a tone that suggested he had already tried it and found it useful. Nathaniel had not tried it. He was not, he told himself, the type. He had heard through the architecture world's particular grapevine that Petra had moved to Seattle. He had not heard much after that. He had not looked. He was aware, in a way he didn't examine too closely, that looking would mean wanting, and wanting would mean admitting the loss was real. He was in Chicago for a client meeting that brought him to Northwestern Memorial Hospital. A preliminary consultation about a proposed expansion of their oncology wing, the kind of project that required the lead architect to understand the emotional geography of the space. He had arrived 40 minutes early, which was typical. He was shown to a waiting area on the 3rd floor, which was routine. He sat down, opened his briefcase, pulled out the floor plan specifications, and then he heard a laugh he recognized from 4 years away. He looked up. Petra was standing near the nurse's station, maybe 30 feet away, talking to someone in scrubs. She looked. The word that came to him was settled. That was the word. She was wearing a gray coat and her hair was shorter, and she was holding a folder, and she was laughing at something the nurse had said, and she looked like a person who had built a life. Nathaniel didn't move. And then 2 small children came around the corner of the hallway, running in that determinedly unsteady way of very young children, and they crashed directly into Petra's legs, and she caught them both without dropping the folder, which suggested she had done this many times before, and she said something to them in a low voice, and they looked up at her with faces that were, he stood up. He didn't know he'd stood up. His body did it before he arrived at the decision. The girls were identical. Dark-haired, round-faced, with Petra's coloring and something else. Something in the set of the jaw. Something in the way one of them was already looking around the room with the specific alertness of a person cataloging the architecture. That hit him somewhere between the sternum and the stomach. Petra hadn't seen him yet. He counted seconds. 3, 4, 5. Then she looked up because one of them pulled on her coat and pointed in his direction, and Petra's face changed. It didn't collapse. It didn't go warm. It went for a moment entirely still, and in that stillness Nathaniel read 4 years of things unsaid, and he understood, with a clarity that he had no right to and no preparation for, that he was looking at his daughters. He crossed the room. He didn't plan the walk. He just walked it. Later he would have no memory of the distance, only of arriving. "Petra," he said. "Nathaniel." Her voice was steady. Of course it was. She had always been steadier than him. The 2 girls pressed close to her sides, looking at him with the open, guileless curiosity of children who have not yet learned to hide their assessments. "Hi," said the one in her hair. She had a small red beret in her hair and who fully intended to be in charge of this conversation. "Hi," said Nathaniel. His voice did something strange. He cleared his throat. "I'm May," said the girl. She gestured to her sister. "This is Lou. We're the same but different." "Different how?" he asked, because he didn't know what else to say. "May talks first," Lou said, from behind Petra's arm. "I think second." Something moved through him. He didn't have a name for it. It felt like grief and relief, arriving at the same time and getting stuck in the doorway together. He looked at Petra. She looked back at him. She hadn't moved. She was waiting, he realized, to see what he would do. She had probably been waiting for this moment, or something like it, for a long time, and she had made plans for multiple versions of it because that was who Petra was. She planned for the versions you hope won't happen. "How old are they?" he asked. He knew, before she answered, what the answer would be. 'They'll be 4 in March," she said. He did the math he had already done. He looked at her for a moment, then back up at her. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked. He kept his voice quiet. He was aware of May, watching him with an unnerving amount of focus for a 4-year-old. Petra's jaw moved. "I tried," she said. "Twice, once by phone, once in person, outside your office. Both times your mother." She stopped, looked at the girls, adjusted. "Both times I was told you were unavailable and would reach out when you were ready." He felt something cold move through him that had nothing to do with the hospital air conditioning. "She didn't tell me," he said. "I know," Petra said. "I figured that out eventually." A pause. "I stopped trying after the second time. I had 2 babies and 2 jobs, and I didn't have anything left to fight with." May, apparently bored with the silence between the adults, tugged on Nathaniel's coat sleeve. "Are you a doctor?" she asked. "No," he said. "Then why are you here? I'm an architect. I'm going to help design a new part of this building." May considered this. "Do you decide where the windows go?" "Sometimes. Mama says windows are important," May said, with the authority of someone delivering policy. "She says light changes everything." Nathaniel looked at Petra. Petra was looking at her daughter with an expression that held about 17 things at once, and only some of them were for the room. "She's right," he said quietly. They did not have the big conversation that day. Petra had a meeting. He had his consultation. They exchanged numbers in the way of people who have passed the point of pretending the exchange isn't significant. And they each said they would be in touch, and they each meant it, and neither of them said anything about what came next, because neither of them knew yet. Nathaniel drove back to his office and sat in his car in the parking garage for 11 minutes. He thought about his mother. He thought about a February night and 2 bags by the door and "I can't keep asking you to show up." He thought about 2 small girls in a hospital hallway, the same height, the same dark hair, one of them asking about windows. He called his mother. Dorothea picked up on the second ring. She always picked up on the second ring. Early enough to seem available, late enough to seem unhurried. "Nathaniel," she said warmly. "I need you to tell me," he said, "about the 2 times Petra contacted you after the divorce." The pause that followed was very brief. That brevity told him everything. "I don't know what you—" "Mom?" Another pause. Longer. "She was gone," Dorothea said. She would have only caused more pain. He sat with that. He looked at the concrete wall of the parking garage. "She was pregnant," he said. "She was calling to tell me she was pregnant." His mother said nothing. "I have 2 daughters," he said, "who are almost 4. And I have missed every single day of their lives. Because you decided for me that I didn't need to know." "Nathaniel, I was protecting. I'll call you when I'm ready," he said. He ended the call. He sat for another 3 minutes. Then he went upstairs and did his job. Because the work still existed and the building still needed to be designed. And being a functional adult in the world did not pause for the moments when the floor dropped out from under you. But that night, alone in his apartment, he let himself feel the full weight of it. He did not perform the grief, or manage it, or schedule it. He just sat with it, the 4 years. The 2 girls, the window comment, the red beret. The way May had grabbed his coat sleeve like it was simply the nearest available object, with no idea what it meant to him, which made it mean more. He thought about what Petra had said. 2 jobs. 2 babies. She had made a life with her hands while he'd been filling his with 60-hour weeks and Sunday dinners with a woman who had stolen something from both of them, and she hadn't collapsed, and she hadn't, as far as he could tell, become bitter. She had just kept going. He fell asleep on the couch sometime around 2 in the morning, and when he woke up, he made coffee and he texted Petra, and he asked if she would be willing to meet, without the girls, just to talk, just to start. She replied 20 minutes later. Yes. They met at a coffee shop in Wicker Park, neutral ground, the following Saturday morning. Petra arrived 4 minutes before him, which was also typical. She was the kind of person who arrived at things slightly early, and then arranged herself with a book so that she appeared not to have been waiting. He saw her through the window before he went in. He stood on the sidewalk for a moment, just a moment. Inside they ordered, and they sat, and for the first few minutes they talked about nothing in particular. The hospital project, her current firm, the Chicago winter, which had been, as always, aggressively committed to its identity, and then she said, What do you want, Nathaniel? From this. From whatever this is. He wrapped both hands around his coffee cup. I want to know them, he said. I know that's not simple. I know I don't have the right to walk in and expect. But I want to know them. I want to be there. He paused. And I owe you an apology that is going to take more than one conversation. Petra was quiet for a moment. I'm not interested in apologies that are really just explanations. I know. I want to be clear about something, she said. Whatever happens, whatever we figure out, it is about them. Not about us. Not about what we were. I know that too. She looked at him for a long moment. He held her gaze. He had learned in the past week to stop looking at his feet. May is going to interrogate you, she said. And the corner of her mouth did something. She has opinions about everything and she will share all of them. Lou takes longer. She watches first. Once she decides she trusts you, she doesn't let go easily. What does she need to trust me, he asked. To see you show up, Petra said, consistently. In the small ways, not a grand gesture. Just there when you said you'd be there. He nodded. I can do that, he said. She studied him. The old you would have said that and believed it and then had an 11-hour day and not understood why it mattered. I know, he said. I'm not asking you to take that on faith. I'm asking you to give me the chance to be different in ways you can actually see. Petra looked out the window for a moment. The street outside was quiet. A dog walker passed with 4 dogs who were only loosely interested in going the same direction. Okay, she said finally. Slow. Very slow. I introduce you as a friend. We see how they respond. No pressure. No timelines. Okay. And if you disappear, she said, if you vanish for 6 weeks because the firm is slammed or because it gets complicated, you will not come back. I will not do that to them. Understood. She picked up her cup. Okay. It wasn't warm. It wasn't a reconciliation. It was a door left open by a person who had every reason to close it, and he understood that for what it was, more than he deserved and less than he'd have the right to ask for, and he accepted it. The first time he spent the afternoon with May and Lou, they were at a park in Lincoln Square. Petra sat on a bench nearby with her book, close enough to intervene, far enough to let the 3 of them figure out their own geography. May immediately proposed a game with rules that changed every 90 seconds, which Nathaniel followed to the best of his ability. Lou sat across from him on the climbing structure and watched him with the specific quality of attention he now recognized. It was Petra's watchfulness, that capacity to go quiet and read a room. Do you know how to make pancakes? Lou asked him, eventually. He thought about it. I know how to follow the instructions on the box, he said. Lou considered this. That's the same, she decided, and climbed up to the next level. At the end of the afternoon, when they were putting on coats to leave, May grabbed his without asking, because she needed it to step down from the curb, and then she didn't let go, and they walked the half-block to Petra's car like that, the 4 of them, in a line that would have looked, from a distance, like nothing particularly remarkable, which was exactly the kind of thing he was learning that turned out to matter most. Petra looked at him over the roof of the car. He didn't try to make it mean something it wasn't. She wasn't smiling at him, not really. She was just looking, checking, the way she would look for the rest of his life. Watching to see if he would stay. He understood that was fair. He showed up the following week, and the week after that. He showed up when work was hard and when weather was bad, and when May was in a mood that made the park feel like a diplomatic summit. He showed up when Lou had a cold and Petra texted to cancel, and he replied, "Do you need anything?" And she said, "Actually some soup from the place on Clark," and he dropped it off, and he left, because it wasn't about being thanked. It was about being there. He was not the man he had been at 36, the one who let Sunday dinners and 60-hour weeks add up into a wall. He couldn't see he was building. He was still learning to be the man he was trying to become, which is different from already being there, but the direction was clear. And the girls, Lou especially, in her quiet, steady way, seemed to be paying attention to the direction. 6 months in, he was putting May and Lou to bed after a Saturday at the Science Museum, which had been May's idea, and which she had treated as a personal expedition she was generously allowing him to join. Lou had fallen asleep on the drive back. May was negotiating an extension to her bedtime, citing the specific unfairness of darkness. Nathaniel sat on the edge of the bed. "Dad," May said, which was the third time she had called him that, and each time she did it, she used it the way you use a new word you're still testing, carefully, checking to see if it fits. "Yeah," he said. "Is the new part of the hospital going to have good windows?" He had been in meetings about the oncology wing expansion every other week for months. He had talked to the department heads about light, about how the quality of natural light in a space where people are very sick can affect how they move through the day. "I think so," he said. "We're working on it. Mama says the best buildings make you feel like there's still a world outside." He sat with that for a moment. "Your mom said that?" "When we drove past the ugly one on the highway. She said it looks like it forgot the world outside." He tucked the blanket around May's shoulders. "Your mom's not wrong about much," he said. May nodded, satisfied. "I know," she said, and closed her eyes. He turned off the light and stood in the doorway for a moment, listening to the apartment breathe, and thought, This is the thing that was always supposed to be here, at the center of everything, and I just didn't know it yet." He didn't say that to Petra, not that night. He had learned to let things exist at their own pace, to not name them before they were ready. But she was in the kitchen when he came out, and she handed him a cup of tea he hadn't asked for, and she said, not looking up, "May called you Dad, third time," he said. She said. They stood in the kitchen for a while with their cups, not talking about what it meant. They didn't need to. Some things that have taken 4 years to find their way back do not need to be narrated once they arrive. He finished his tea. He said goodnight. He put on his coat. At the door, she said quietly, "Same time next Saturday." Same time. He walked to his car in the dark, and he drove home, and he sat in the quiet of his apartment. The kind of quiet that doesn't feel empty anymore. And he thought about 2 small faces in a hospital hallway, and a window question, and a set of hands that grabbed his without asking. He had walked into that building to design something that helped people through the hardest days of their lives. He had not expected to find, in a waiting room on the 3rd floor, the only thing he had ever built that actually mattered. And to find that it had been under construction without him, by someone who never needed him to save it, only to finally show up and help.